I'm here by virtue of the fact that in 2008, I did document the aftermath of an incredible weather event that we had here, and then the subsequent cleanup by the residents of the town, which was quite amazing how that came about. And you know, Dorothy, when she asked me to do this over a year ago, there were several alternate dates that came and went, and then finally she said Memorial Day weekend, and I thought, you know, is anybody going to come out to this thing? And she says, oh yes, yes, and she says, I'm especially hoping that we have bad weather. And I said, why? He said, well, we always get more people when there's bad weather. So we did have some bad weather today, and we have a good turnout, and you've come here to hear about even worse weather. So, which is what we have going on in the country right now. We have a real serious problem with weather. There's perhaps not a day that goes by where we don't hear about some calamity in the country caused by some weather event, whether it's flooding or a tornado, or at various times a year out in California there could be fires, mudslides, drought, and possibly floods. In the Northeast during the winter there are tremendous snowfalls, and in the Southeast there's once again drought and sandstorms, and in the Southeast we have the scourge of hurricanes. Whereas here in Ogden Dunes, we have a storm siren that's located about 40 yards away from us, and I think I only hear that go off the first Tuesday of every month when it's tested. We normally do not experience horrible weather here. The last big storm that I can remember was last year, 4th of July, when we had 60-mile-an-hour winds tear through here just when the fireworks were about to go off on the beach. We don't have storms like that too often, and the storm that I'm going to talk about was not one like that. It was one that grew. It was one that was a conjoining of numerous weather systems that compounded one another over time and created a catastrophe. It created a flood, and that flood is what then dumped tons of material on our beach. And the interesting thing is these occurrences all happened remotely. They started either hundreds of miles away and affected us here, and then ultimately there were occurrences dozens of miles away that affected us here.
I had been out of town when the actual storm hit, so when I came back to work the day after we returned, I was hit with the aftermath of this storm. And the beach here in Ogden Dunes, this is our crown jewel. I mean, it's the whole point of Ogden Dunes is this beach. And it just, I had never seen anything like it. Just the debris from the storm, the tree branches. We had boat dock remnants. We had parts of boats on our beach. Just unbelievable the amount of damage and debris that had been deposited here on the north shore of the lake.
Now, ironically, I shot that with Marshall Reeder last week, and that beach looks like a mess. Yeah. That beach looks similar to the beach storm. It was much greater magnitude in 2008, but it looks awful. The first thing I'd like to do is take us back and set the stage of what 2008 was, because it was a quite momentous year. And I had personally forgotten much of 2008, and specifically leading up to September when all these storm events happened. Smartphones had only just come out. They'd been out for about a year. It was not all pervasive, so very limited use of smartphones. Standard definition TV was just going away. As a matter of fact, some of the material that you see that I shot on the beach in 2008 was shot in standard definition. But it was at that time being replaced by high definition television. And not many people had it at this point. That August was the Beijing Summer Olympics. And just to jog your memory a little bit, I thought I'd show a couple of the movies that were out at that time. I didn't think it was a particularly great year for movies, but we did have, after all, Kung Fu Bandit. It was the start of these two franchises. The very first films of Iron Man and Taken came out that year and went on to all sorts of subsequent movies, and this won the Academy Award. It was also a presidential election year. We had the first African American as a candidate, and John McCain surprised everyone with his running mate, which provided a lot of material for Tina Fey on Saturday Night Live.
Just look at how far we've come. Hillary Clinton, who came so close to the White House, and me, Sarah Palin, who is even closer. Can you believe it, Hillary?
But I think one of the big things that people remember about that year was the economic collapse. And let me show you, this is September right here. The stock market dropped in one day 777 points. And it was all due to subprime mortgage lending and the crisis that created. And it started in the United States and it went around the world. 500,000 people lost their jobs that year. And one of the largest and prestigious brokerage firms in the world, Lehman Brothers, filed for bankruptcy. And I bring this up because it's significant. It coincides directly with our storm, which happened just before September 15th. So let's take a look at the storm, but actually, more appropriately, it was 3 storms. There were 3 weather systems that grouped together to cause the disaster we had on our beach. And the first was Hurricane Gustav and the remnants thereof that came our way. Hurricane Gustav was something that came up the Gulf Coast. It caused all sorts of problems in Haiti and Cuba. I think almost 200 people were killed. And it hit landfall in Louisiana and tore right up the states in the Midwest toward us, as you can see, and then dumped a lot of rainfall right on our area. And if you can see the chart there, it says approximately 4 inches of rain fell in northwestern Indiana. Following the next week was Tropical Storm Lowell. And this is very strange. Lowell was way out in the Pacific Ocean, and it made landfall in the tip of Baja, California, at Cabo San Lucas area. But it kind of continued up and went right up into our area, and it was a weather system that essentially stalled over northern Illinois and Indiana. At one point, it dumped 6.5 inches on O'Hare, closed the airport. It was the most rain they had ever had since recordings began. And there was flooding in Chicago. There was flooding here. We got another 4 or 5 inches from Lowell. Then, following that immediately was the remnants of Hurricane Ike. Hurricane Ike was forecast to once again come up the Gulf Coast through the Texas area and come our way. It did reach landfall in Houston and Galveston, and it was huge. It was, and it caused a lot of damage. The eventual track of that once again tore through Cuba. This was a huge storm, and it went even closer to us, as you can see. Dumping once again tremendous amounts of rainfall and even more rain on us in its path. And as you can see, this area here is us. In LaPorte, they had almost 14 inches, but we had about 10 to 11 right there. And if you compare this to Gustav, it was very similar. Here's Gustav and back to Ike. And Gustav, once again, it's that same big finger of rain that came in and just clobbered us. The U.S. Geological Survey did a study of this flooding, and that's what happened as a result. You can see right up here, this area is 11 inches or so. Here's 11 inches, 9, 8. All of this was just inundated with water from Ike. In the Munster area, there was tremendous flooding there. 2 people died in the course of this weather event, and there was millions of dollars of damage to both homes and businesses.
Well, for me, it started on Friday. I was in Indianapolis with my husband, and you could just feel the air was just very dense with moisture. You could tell something was coming. And of course, I believe it started raining that day, rained all day Saturday. And on Sunday, when I think the main event came, when the flash flooding started to happen, I was helping lead a hike of the Portage Lakefront site before it was even open with one of the National Park Rangers for Save the Dunes. And we saw in the ditch all of this stuff coming down the ditch. It was just amazing. We saw boats and marinas and all kinds of things just flash flooding down the ditch. And then when you walked up to the beach a little bit, you could see stuff starting to land on our beach already. And this was probably about 10:30 in the morning. So things were already happening then. And it was amazing to see what the final result was the next day.
Yeah, isn't it terrible? It's just what
That
Mother Nature
storm-
will do.
The storm ripped out the whole
The whole ditch, the whole Isaac Walton, all their docks and everything are gone. I lost my boat, lost my dock, gazebo, everything inside of it. The whole thing left.
Isaac Walton is completely washed away. The whole channel, because the channel's so small, it was so powerful. If it was a bit of wide mouth, it had somewhere to go. But boats were just crashing into one another. People were crying. It was just like a nightmare.
Oh my God.
Trees were uprooted, big trees. I'm not talking small twigs. I'm talking big trees with big roots.
Over here at the barge where the ditch wall comes out, the barge ran into the brick wall, and there's an oil spillage all through there, and the helicopters and the Coast Guards made us leave. And I said, well, the Coast Guard sent us over here to see if we could find our boat. There are so many boats that were parked next to us that are landed up down there, but that barge is in pieces over there.
All I found was my cover to my motor, my back seats I found, and I found where my new carpeting was attached to the wood flooring. I don't see any of my aluminum, none of it.
I've lived here 52 years and have never ever seen anything like this.
Nothing.
Here, I'm just going to pause this on this scene because this is the day after the storm. Okay, I didn't get there when it was at its peak, but as it is here, if any of you know or are boaters, there are speed limits, no wake, 15-mile-an-hour speed limits along the channel. And if you were sitting in a boat, you'd probably be breaking the speed limit because it would just take you right down that channel into the lake. So tremendous amount of water, and even more so the days before this, before I got here.
So I believe we had about 12 inches of rain in that time period. That may not be an exact number, but it was close to that. And if it didn't happen here, it probably happened in other parts of the watershed, which is 331 square miles, stretching all the way over to almost the state line in Munster and Cherville. So if you think about that, and you think about how much impervious surface there is, and the storm water that is deposited into the Little Calumet River system that ends up at Burns Ditch like a giant funnel, just funneling it all out. And then that's the west branch. There's also the east branch of the Little Calumet River, and there was a tremendous amount of rainfall in that part of the river system as well.
Okay, Susan, I'm going to jump in here for a moment. Let me just make sure everyone is really clear on this, because this is the amazing thing that created all this this garbage on our beach, was the fact that we have all these rivers. They all terminate in Burns Ditch, which then dumps into Lake Michigan. And then we have all of these waterways doing the same thing. So we have an area this large, and I think Susan said over 300 square miles of area, not only rainfall, but sewage overflows. When a town cannot handle all the sewage that they have and process it, it just goes right into the river. So we had just a tremendous amount of water, as Susan said, funneled right down here, and it went right around here and on our beach.
So that is quite a bit of rainfall to actually come down to this area through those storm systems that sort of collided together and formed sort of a perfect storm.
The local communities here, Chesterton was one and Valparaiso another one, their overflow from their stormwater collection systems were not at the capacity that they are today. When they hit the full capacity level, the water had to go somewhere, and it went straight into the local waterways, which eventually wound their way up into Burns Waterway and Little Cal, which caused the river levels to rise to unprecedented levels that we've really never seen in this area before.
I probably didn't see the result of the storm until about that Sunday evening, maybe Monday morning, when you saw piles of things that had landed on the beach, marinas, boats. I mean, it was just amazing. those were just the large things. There were also lots of very small things like lures and glass and splinters of wood and things that could have been very dangerous to the public.
The beach here in Ogden Dunes, this is our crown jewel. I mean, it's the whole point of Ogden Dunes is this beach. And I had never seen anything like it. Just the debris from the storm, the tree branches. We had boat dock remnants. We had parts of boats on our beach. Just unbelievable the amount of damage and debris that had been deposited here on the north shore of the lake.
With regard to the cleanup effort, it was sort of ironic that we already had one scheduled that next Saturday through the annual cleanup sponsored by the Alliance for the Great Lakes.
I'm going to stop this because this is the date that Susan's referring to, and I also put this in illustrating the subsequent controlled burn that happened. I don't know that this is exactly when it happened. Eric, you might have a better idea, but it happened after the beach cleanup, and then there was a day that was chosen when the wind direction was appropriate for that controlled burn.
It's interesting to note that at that time, we didn't have Facebook or anything to help advertising an event like this. So we put signage up on mailboxes, we put signage up at the front of the town, and lo and behold, we had 125 people actually sign in to receive materials and sign waivers and so forth. But there may have been many other people who actually just went to the beach near them and started picking up trash and raking up trash into piles.
Well, I see as I'm standing here that there are more and more people coming with gloves and shovels, and everybody is trying to clean up this mess.
Now tell me a little bit about these pink gloves you have here.
These are mine. I brought these myself.
Okay.
We have a disaster here of magnanimous proportions. We have pollution in wood form, which are womanized wood, railroad ties, you name it, it's on this beach.
This is our canine residents at work here.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
What do you think about this beach cleanup effort?
I think the beach cleanup is a great idea, and it's definitely necessary, and in fact, we're going to have more to do even after today.
Yeah. Have you seen big things come off the beach already?
Yeah, big things like boats, they're big things.
Piers.
Large trees. Many branches.
Yes. Coolers. Chairs.
Yeah.
Gloves and garbage bags. Be careful, wear good shoes.
We have limited resources, and our greatest resource, I think, as you could see out here, are the people that live here and their efforts that they're willing to put in when it comes to this sort of a situation.
Taking garbage bag and counting tallying what kind of garbage you find? Sure.
All the volunteers, the people in the community are coming down to try and clean up the inorganic materials that we have on the beach. Once that's done, we'll be able to get in with more heavy equipment and bigger equipment than even the tractor you see back here. And that's going to collect all the driftwood and all the organic materials. Then what we're going to hope to do is get those into piles, and then we're going to have controlled burns to take care of that debris.
This is one of the examples of what makes Ogden Dunes special are all the residents, and I believe there are probably some guests who have turned out to help clean this beach. I've lived here since 1974, and this is the worst I've ever seen the beach from a storm. So this is a great thing to see happen, that everybody come out and help clean this up. It's a massive job for just paid town people to do, and so this is very nice.
I'm really surprised at how many people are here because I didn't think there would be. And I've grown up here, and I always think there's a lot of nasty crap on the beach, and like we never really clean it up, and it's kind of cool how like everybody gets together and like cares about their community and stuff.
There's a little town here, and we all pitch in together to do stuff when something nasty happens. I think that's kind of nice. But you know, there's a great sense of community in this place too. Well, I think they're gonna have hot dogs. That's something.
Are they?
Yeah, hot dogs at 11:30. Sure. Yeah, and by then, we're all gonna be ready for it.
Apparently people have been down here before getting a lot of the bigger debris up because there's just little things and wood, and but it's nice to see people of every age working down here together, which is what a community is.
Well, we just moved here this summer and we love the beach and everything about the community, and this is just part of being part of the town. What do you think?
Yep.
Look at the camera and talk about why you like Ogden Dunes.
Well, I like Ogden Dunes because it's not like you don't have to drive like, it's just really nice because you're right by the water.
Well put.
Well, we're here because we go to Valpo High School and we're in an environmental science class, so it's actually required that we do 10 hours of community service each semester. So we get information like places like where to go, like here, and clean up, and get so many hours done. Like I thought we'd just be picking up like garbage people would leave, not just like this huge amount of debris.
We're picking up the remains of multiple docks and piers that floated out of the Little Cal and the Burns waterway, wound up here on our beach. So we'll be chainsawing it and picking them up. We're getting it all cleared out of here. We got a loader down here now that's clearing the path along the waterway, so if we do have an emergency down here, at least we can get emergency vehicles, police and fire can get down here.
It's leadership showing up when it's called for, and people volunteering. There must be 100 people down here today, and it's just remarkable how much everybody loves the town and is willing to contribute to, you know, to take a sad situation and make it better. So just grateful. That's about it. That's enough out of me.
When we came out here after the storms, we couldn't believe what we saw, basically, my wife and I. So we came out here, we wanted to help because we use this beach quite a bit in the summertime. So we felt obligated to come out here and help. And it's great to see all our other neighbors out here too, pitching in to clean up the beach.
Town and fire department have secured an emergency permit that we can do some large burn operations, and hopefully we can get some wind out of the south so it takes the smoke and embers over Lake Michigan, and we can burn the large accumulation of trees and branches and that kind of thing off and get the beach recovered as much as possible.
I've never seen anything like this in my 66 years, and I think the water going down Burns Ditch was at least 20 miles an hour. And it's amazing that this much stuff came out of that creek, but I do know it drains 300 and some square miles, so it's a big area. So I've been cutting up logs, and other people have been hauling them, which I think is a smart way to do it. I don't have to do the heavy lifting.
This beach cleanup is a perfect example of the kind of volunteer effort that is necessary to run a town like this. On Saturday, the volunteers far exceeded my expectations. They cleaned all of the garbage from the beach, which was really the first step. And then they started piling the wood. From there, the wood is all going to be consolidated into some larger piles so that the town can do in a controlled manner burning of those piles when the conditions are right, and so that we can notify residents when it's happening, so that we can burn down those piles in a reasonable manner and manage them. But we need to really look at what the volume of water and how it flows down Burns Ditch and how those watersheds are managed. Are we really managing them to the fullest extent possible? Considering the amount of development in Northwest Indiana and considering the impact that it ultimately has on one of the largest freshwater bodies in the entire world.
A couple of things that are interesting is that we don't have a beach like that anymore. We don't have a beach that deep. We don't have a beach that goes all the way to the Portage Lakefront. So that is interesting. We also don't have a lot of the residents that were helping out. They don't live here anymore. I noticed several people that have moved to other places. And one person in particular we don't have anymore, and that was Jim Kopp, driving that tractor like Parnelli Jones on the beach. Just interesting from a historical standpoint, the things that have changed.
I just thought it was amazing how people showed that they cared about our beach and actually came down to volunteer their time for several hours that day. And so with the help of all of the volunteers, it was 125 that I knew of, but I'm sure it was many more than that. We had that beach cleaned up probably midday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, starting at about 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it was really amazing. Now, as any town situation like that, we had a lot of chiefs who had different ideas about how to get things done, but fortunately we had enough workers out there to make sure that things happened. And everyone seemed to have pretty good ideas, everyone cooperated, and the work actually got done.
Yeah, the cleanup was primarily, it was done by the residents of Ogden Dunes. And I think that's kind of what makes Ogden Dunes unique, is the people in this town are willing to step up and volunteer to do what needs to be done in this town. We're a small town, we don't have a lot of resources. And we had people from all over town down here on this beach collecting debris, place it in the piles. We had kids, we had adults, we had old people, young people. There was everybody came together for the good of the town to take care of this problem.
Eric Kurtz, the fire chief, I believe had to get special permission to allow us to burn some of the larger piles on the beach because there was no other way that stuff could have gotten taken away. And when I say piles, it was all organic debris, big tree trunks and things like that. So one more little interesting tidbit about the cleanup effort is that we had our cleanup done within a matter of days when you consider the residents actually cleaning up and then the work that had to be done afterwards. Meanwhile, the National Park Service also had major debris on their beaches, and because they have so much bureaucracy, unfortunately, they had to coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers, I believe. They took several months to clean up their portion of the beach. So thinking about today, if this were to happen, and also thinking out into the future, there are several, I believe, positive developments that we have to think about and we can't forget, because there's also a lot of things that are not so favorable. But on the positive side, some of the cities and towns in the area now have, for the combined sewer overflows, they don't have those anymore. They have holding tanks or holding sites for their stormwater so that they can process that once the storm passes. They can hold on to it and process it through their system once the storm passes. Now, of course, those things only have so much capacity. But as of the last couple of summers, we are seeing our beach water quality results improving, and I think that's part of the reason. So as more cities and towns develop their developable areas, that's more storm water that is going into the watershed. that's running off through impervious surfaces. We could hope that perhaps a city of Gary might shrink its footprint so that it's not putting as much stormwater, or they're putting more what is called green infrastructure in, and that means, you know, planting more trees, putting in rain gardens, things that will help absorb stormwater. But unfortunately, in a situation like this, when the ground was so saturated already because we had had month upon month upon month of more than normal rainfall, and then 12 inches on top of that all, the water has nowhere to go. Unfortunately, right now also, at this point in time, in 2019, lake levels are at an extremely high level and are expected to go up even more before July 2019. It's already 9 inches above where it was a year ago, and I'm afraid that if this were to happen again, we would probably see residential property affected. We would also probably see more erosion on our beach, which really cannot be sustained. It's just not a sustainable situation for us. It's very dire right now as it is. So we hope that resources can be found in the future to restore our beaches, really to look at the beaches as infrastructure in itself, green natural infrastructure in itself. We need those foredunes and so forth to make sure that our yards are protected from wave action.
Today, I think if something like this happened here today, we would have a worse nightmare than what we had 10 years ago. Our beach is maybe a quarter of what it was then, what's left of it. We have half the beach is totally gone. It's at the seawall. Really, the only thing that's saving what little beach we have right now is this foredune we're standing on. And if this foredune goes or gets washed away, we have a lot of homes that are going to be in trouble. The town's working a lot with the state of Indiana and trying to work with the federal government to come to some kind of solution. But if that storm happened again this year, I think there would be dire consequences.
One of the things that I took away from that storm event is that our town can really come together when it matters. And so whether it's another storm event or something else where the town needs to unite and put any differences aside, I really do believe that our residents will come together and do what is necessary. I'm especially hopeful about the younger generation of people that are moving into town with their young families. I just admire some of the things they're doing already that tell me that they would have that kind of dedication.
The date that Dorothy chose for this presentation, I think, is apropos because it's the day before the Memorial Day gathering at the soccer field, which, when I moved here from Chicago, was one of the most amazing things I had seen. The entire town comes out, and probably due to the lure of free beer and hot dogs, but they all come out, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And the beach was that for us too. It was a gathering place. And I always said it was a very leveling gathering place because everyone saw one another in their bathing suit. So, but you know, there are some sad elements to this story and there's some really joyous elements. And some of the sad things are the fact that we are losing our beach, and it's a hard thing to wrap our minds around or to or deny that it's ever, you know, that it's happening and it's going to come back. It's a difficult thing. We're not going to be nourished by NIPSCO anymore, and we're getting higher levels of water, so there's concern. But on the other side, the people of this town are really quite extraordinary. And I've never lived in a place where I know my neighbors and where people wave at you. I go down Chicago and I look at people and wave at them, and they don't know what to do. They're frightened. But out here,
they might have you in.
yeah, right. So It was an interesting thing having gone through this and then seeing where we are today. And if any of you have any stories or tidbits to offer about this event, Warner, why don't you share what you told me? He has an interesting little story about something that he found along the beach.
Well, we had a friend that was staying with us for a while. I lived in Pine Shore Drive during that time, and he dragged this, what I thought was a mannequin off the beach. It wasn't a mannequin, it was a solid structure, and it weighed more than a